So yesterday we were talking about the Buddha's life and how the Buddha's life is very much an example for our own life and the kind of challenges that we have to go through. I was just on the phone with a young man who was going to come to EML, and then at the last minute changed his mind, and we had a long conversation this morning, and he's basically undergoing the same challenges that the Buddha went through that I think a lot of you are probably going through too, in the sense of determining, thinking about what's the value of my life and what does living a meaningful life mean, and what is really deep in my heart that I can't ignore, that I want to live out. And those are very, very important questions, because those are the questions that, depending on whether we spend the time examining them or not, will influence what decisions we make. Because if you look, the entire world is telling us that we're crazy if we want to be monastics. Do you have that experience? Mm-hmm. Yeah? That your family, your friends, they think, when you say that you're interested in monastic life, they say, what in the world are you talking about? Even sometimes they're Buddhist practitioners, but they say you can practice as a layperson. Why do you need to be a monastic? Isn't monastic life very extreme? And to that I always respond, well, samsara is extreme. Yeah. If you choose to stay in samsara, you're just as much of an extremist, aren't you? So Johnny asked us to make prayers for him this evening, where we'll be doing the request for training, and then we'll be doing the Lama Chupa Puja and Sok, which we do every 2 weeks. So he asked us to make a special dedication for him this evening, which we'll do. But I think, like his situation, the Buddha's situation, your situation, it's all very similar. And finding other people who know what you're feeling and who understand what you're talking about is not so easy. Yeah? Because your family might be telling you that you're crazy. Yeah? Anybody's family telling you that you're crazy if you want to ordain? Yeah? Yeah, completely crazy. How about your friends? They're telling you you're nuts? Like, why in the world do you want to do something like that? There's so much in life to go out and enjoy. Why don't you go enjoy it all? Yeah? But then, after you enjoy it all, what do you have? Yeah, you've gone and you've done all those things that other people are telling you it's wonderful to do and that constitute a good life and a successful life. And after you've done them, what do you have?
Pictures. Photos.
Yeah, you have photos and you have negative karma. And that's about it. Yeah? You have photos and scrapbooks, and now my dad doesn't have photo albums now. My brother my sister-in-law actually got him. They have these things now. They're about this big, and you have all your pictures on a thumb drive, and you plug it in, and then you get a new picture showing on the screen every few seconds. So you have your whole life, in front of you every few seconds with, everybody who's near and dear to you. And then, when you're old, you look at that and you say, well, that's the meaning of my life. That's what I have to show for it. All these pictures of where I've been and what I've done. And, the pictures with all those people shaking the hands of the important people. Here's somebody giving me the certificate. Here's somebody introducing me for this. So you have all the photos. Yeah. And then how are you going to feel when you're an older person? That's what you have. And you have a bunch of memories. Huh? And then you look back and you think, well, in the process of enjoying all those things that everybody told me I should enjoy, what kind of karma did I create? Huh? Now, we all know that actions motivated by attachment create destructive karma. Yeah, actions motivated by anger or jealousy or arrogance or ignorance about cause and effect. Yeah, these actions create destructive karma. Actions done with a kind motivation, really beneficial, that is imbued with wisdom and, an aspiration for the well-being of others, and especially an aspiration to lead for others to have the joy of the Dharma, not just worldly joy. Those actions are going to produce constructive karma. So what kind of actions did we accumulate having all those pleasures and entertainment that the world was telling us that we should enjoy? What kind of karma did we create through it all? Yeah? Just kind of look at your daily life, how your daily life is, and what's motivating most of your actions. Is it an attitude of renunciation or bodhicitta or kindness? And by kindness, I don't mean attachment. Attachment and kindness are two different ballgames. Being kind to somebody we're attached to is not the kind of kindness I'm talking about, because that's the kind of kindness that is coming around. I'm nice to you because you make me feel good. Yeah. Or you're part of me, so I'm nice to you because you're part of me. But, even animals have that kind of kindness towards whoever they're attached to. So that's not even necessarily a human, an especially unique human quality. But to look in our life and what kind of karma do we create most of the time? And if we were to live the life that most people tell us we should live, what kind of karma are we going to create day and night in that life? So this is something extremely important to think about. It's the most important thing you have to think about. Yeah? Because it's so important to really consider, what does living a meaningful life mean? And what is useful for myself and all other beings in the long term? And, that's so important to examine that kind of thing. And if we don't, then, we're going to basically live on automatic. We're going to basically just be a conditioned product of our environment. So that when the latest Batman movie comes out, we want to go see it because that's what you're supposed to do. Isn't it? Yeah, you're supposed to like Batman movies and go see them. I always always thought that was so boring.
You just don't know.
Yeah. See, that's what they told me. You're so, you just don't know. If you really tried it, you'd see how exciting Batman movies are. But, my question is, they had, because they were right in the middle of a shooting scene, a violent scene in the Batman movie, and that was entertaining. And right at that time, then they had their own real-life Batman movie with real-life violence, and they didn't think that was entertaining. Why not? Why not? Why is it entertaining to watch violence on a screen? But when you have it real live, it's the opposite of entertaining. This is my question. Yeah? So, people, like you said, you just don't know how entertaining and how much fun it is. Well, try sitting in it in a real live context. If you really think that that's so entertaining, enlist in the army and go to Afghanistan and see what it's like if it's entertaining then. Yeah, we had a young man last year who was an Iraq War veteran who came to EML. You can tell it's not entertaining in the real life. Yeah. So, these kinds of questions are so important, and this is exactly what the Buddha had to deal with. You look at the Buddha's life, his parents had his whole life written for him beforehand. I think many of our parents might have too. You grow up and then you do this. Some of our parents wanted us to go to college. Some of our parents didn't. Then all of our parents want us to get married. None of our parents would tell us not to get married, right? They all tell you get married, And then after you get married, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to have your 2.5 children, And then you have your 2.5 children, and, you wake up in the middle of the night when they're screaming, and you feed them. Yeah, and then you wait until they become teenagers, and they refuse to walk down the street with you. Yeah. And then, you work very, very hard to get the money to give to your kids so that your kids can have their own room with their own computer and their own iPod and their own iPad so they can feel connected to everybody but extremely lonely at the same time because they don't know how to have real live interactions with real live human beings. Okay, but you work very hard to get the money to give them that, and then to give them the money to go to therapy afterwards because they feel so lonely and cut off from others. Mm-hmm. So, it's really something to think about. If you live, the Buddha had that same choice. Yeah, his dad wanted him to grow up to be the king. It's like, your mom and dad want you to grow up to be, a senator or president or somebody important in society. And they gave Siddhartha everything he wanted. If they had blackberries and blueberries and, and raspberries and iPods and YouTube and everything, he would have gotten all of that and more. Yeah. He had all the dancing girls. That was better than what they have this thing online for Buddhists who want to meet partners. What's it called? Some kind of Buddhist dating service, Yeah. So you go online and you meet another Buddhist. Yeah, so you can both practice renunciation together. Yeah. So I'm sure that the Buddha would have, had gone on that too. Parents would have made sure he went on the Buddhist dating service. Yeah. And then, you bring the girl home and have the family dinner, and the parents check her out and tell you what they think. And yeah, I mean, the Buddha didn't even get to select his own bride. His parents did for him. She happened to be nice. She later ordained. Yeah, but the same challenges we face are the same ones that the Buddha faced before. And so I think that's really important to know. We aren't alone, and these are the challenges that come from swimming upstream. Yeah, monastic life is also often said to be like swimming upstream, because we're going against the current of the regular society. We're, instead of following along, we're asking questions. We're saying, you say this is happiness. Is it really? We're just asking the question, is it really happiness? Yeah, you look and you see the people who have all this, are they really happy? Yeah, do you know people who are wealthy who are happy? Do you know anybody who's content with the amount of money they have? Can always use some more. Yeah. Do you know anybody who has a good long-term relationship? Do you know any couples that don't quarrel? That don't have habit patterns where they really completely with each other? Yeah. Do you know anybody who has the perfect job that they like year after year? So we're just questioning, that's all, with our wisdom. Instead of blindly believing, we're questioning. We're saying, society teaches us this. That's fine. I was conditioned that way. Is it true? What really is true? Yeah. My purpose in life is truth. My purpose in life isn't to blend in and do what other people want me to do. My purpose in life is to discover what is true and what reality is. So that means I have to question everything. I don't just bite the hook and swallow the bait. Yeah, I question. There's a worm on the end of this hook. Gee, it looks delicious. Yeah, you're a fish in your water where all the other fishes want worms, and that worm looks so delicious and it's right in front of you. And you ask, what happens if I bite that hook? Or, I want the worm, but to get the worm I have to bite the hook. I can't have the worm without biting the hook. Unless you hope that the worm falls off, which it's highly unlikely to do. So that means I have to bite the hook. So what's going to happen to me if I bite that hook? Well, first thing, I get the delicious worm. Delicious worm. What's the second thing that happens after you bite the hook? Yeah. There's pain, isn't there? You've got a hook in your mouth, and then it's getting pulled, and somebody pulls it, and you're resisting, and who's going to win, you or the one who's pulling that hook? So, it's good if the fish thinks a little bit beforehand. Yeah. If you're just a fish that lives on automatic, you bite the hook because it looks good. The immediate thing is good, but there's no thought about what happens after that immediate pleasure. What are the results of my actions? What are the long-term results of my actions? Yeah. What kind of causes am I creating to experience what kind of results? Because if we believe in karma, and if we believe that what we're experiencing is the result of causes that we created in the past, then what kind of causes am I creating now for what kind of results to experience in the future? And if I want certain results, am I creating the causes in line with those results? If I want a happy, peaceful life, do I create the cause for that by arguing with other people and getting angry? If I want a life full of Dharma meaning, do I create the cause for that by watching television? Yeah. And so really, kind of asking ourselves, because our life is in our hand, things are not predestined. We are creating our lives through the actions that we do, and we experience the results of the actions that we've created. So there's a lot of choice in this, and responsibility in it as well. Yeah. And so we always think, what are the results of my actions? And then sometimes we really mess up. Sometimes we bite the hook. Yeah? But we somehow manage to get ourselves off that hook. And then the idea is, if it was a small hook and the guy at the other end of it fell asleep, so you manage somehow to get yourself off the hook, then shouldn't you learn something from that experience? Yeah. So, of course, we're all going to make mistakes. For sure, we're going to make mistakes. And mistakes are not so bad as long as we learn from them, and as long as we can clean them up afterwards. Some mistakes are so serious that they really determine the rest of our life, this lifetime, and into the future lifetimes. George Zimmerman made a huge mistake, didn't he? Shooting Trevor Martin. He made a huge mistake. And that mistake is going to affect the rest of his life, completely the rest of his life. Yeah? Other times we make mistakes, but, it's not too big, and we're able to step away from it and look and go, whoa! I learned something really important from making that mistake. And so, sometimes we need to be in an environment where we have that freedom to make mistakes, because we don't always take other people's word for things. It's nice when we can learn from other people's experiences, because then we don't have to make every mistake ourselves in order to learn that that's not something wise to do. But sometimes we don't trust other people's advice or their experiences, and we want to do it all, and then see where it leads us. And some, like I said, some of those mistakes, when we do it all, are light and we learn from them. And other mistakes are really big ones that determine the rest of this lifetime, and we may still learn a lot from it, but our choices are very much limited afterwards. Yeah, like George Zimmerman might meet the Dharma. I hope he does. But his choices about practicing and living the Dharma are going to be very limited, aren't they? Yeah. Of course, it depends what the court does with him, but, his own mental state. Okay. Or I have one inmate that I'm writing to. Seems like quite a nice young man. He killed his father and his stepfather and his mother a few years back. Yeah. I mean, this is the most it's right from the list of the 5 heinous actions. So he's in prison for the rest of his life. So he made a huge mistake, He really likes the Dharma now, but his opportunity for practice is quite limited. But he's sure doing his best. And I think, sometimes difficult situations make people really rise and work harder, and other people, the difficult situation makes them crumble. So it just depends. But, so we make mistakes, so the important thing is to learn from them and hope they're not really big boo-boos. I've done things in my life that could have turned out to be really big boo-boos, but somehow miraculously they didn't. Have you done things in your life that could have turned out to be really huge mistakes? Yeah? Well, that's a good talk for a discussion group, isn't it? All the nearly huge mistakes that we've made. Yeah. And yet maybe we learned something very important from it. Sometimes we didn't learn what was important from that mistake until years later. When I think of one of the biggest mistakes I made, afterwards I didn't even realize. I mean, it was explained to me, I saw what the situation was, but it didn't really click like what a huge mistake this was until many, many years later. Yeah, when I see what could have happened from that. Yeah. But of course I had to go do those things because I wasn't going to listen to my parents. And if I had listened to my parents too, I wouldn't have, there's some mistakes I think we have to make in our life. Some mistakes it's good if we can learn from other people. But, our parents can't protect us from every mistake. And sometimes in trying to protect us from a mistake, they become the mistake. Like my grandnephew, who I don't know if they're ever going to let him do anything because he might get sick. Yeah? So, okay. So just to know that you're in good company, that the Buddha went through what you're going through. It's not new, and we all have to kind of go through it and learn things. But really think about what's important and not just get caught up in the moment of what feels good. Anybody want to tell stories of their big mistakes?
really, I think it was last year when I celebrated my 56th birthday, I looked at myself in the mirror one morning and I said, you're really lucky to be alive. And those are the kind of things. Having just very flagrant, unprotected sex with people who were in intimate relationships. I did that for years. Waking up in the morning and not knowing how I got home, considering that I drove in my car on a cold winter night. I had a lot of those. Going out, hiking in the woods totally unprepared and having hypothermia twice. And yeah, just being really inconsiderate of other people and being totally absorbed in getting what I want when I want. Disregarding appropriateness and ethical conduct and taking things that didn't belong to me and hoping that I didn't get caught. My 20s, I did a lot of that kind of thing. And so I'm really, first of all, I'm surprised that I'm not dead. And second of all, that I don't have children and unhappy relationships with people that I didn't really care about. I just wanted to have a good time. And then, really being dangerous, foolishly risk-taking, looking and treasuring. The whole idea of a precious human life didn't even occur to me. I thought I was immortal, so it didn't really happen. Yeah. So I think those were the three things when I look over, when I do my purification and I review my life during the 3-month retreats. These are the ones, the 20s were really, and the drugs, though. I'm not in some very unstable mental place or suicidal. I was suicidal for 2 years. Yeah. I'm here.
Yeah, and those are kind of normal things that people do, even. What you talked about isn't anything extraordinary, is it? You weren't doing anything that, none of the rest of us didn't do. Yeah. So the whole idea is to learn from these things, and I think that's one of the reasons I really enjoy talking to older people, is that they've lived through a lot in their life, and if they're thoughtful older people, you can really learn a lot. What they've lived through and what they've seen and how they've reacted, and not necessarily that what they tell me is the way I want to be, but just to understand what it's like to live through a certain period of time or a certain historical event. If your parents, my parents grew up during the Depression, so I have no idea of what the Depression's like. Now, everybody complains about the economy now, but this is nothing like what I heard about from my parents and grandparents. This is nothing like what they went through. Yeah. So I find it quite interesting to hear older people's life experience, and then use it to see kind of where am I and what can I learn from their experience, and if I ever went through that kind of experience, what Dharma perspective could I take that would help me transform that experience into the Dharma. Okay, so we left off the story of the Buddha cutting off his hair and throwing away his designer jeans, his Nike shoes, getting all the tattoos erased, taking off taking out the tongue, piercings, taking out the piercings, and yeah. So he's doing all of that, and he's now, saying, I want to be free from cyclic existence, and I need a teacher. I need somebody to show me how to do it. Because he realized he didn't know. So he went to two of the most famous teachers at his time, and both of them were quite well respected and very famous because they had attained higher states of meditative absorptions in the jhanas and in the formless absorptions. And Siddhartha, mastered the jhana teachings that his first teacher taught him, and he he attained the same realizations as his teacher, and then his teacher said, I invite you to come lead the community with me. So isn't that great? Now you have your Dharma, and now you're going to be a famous samsaric leader. Whoa, you get two in one. And he turned it down. And he said no, because he knew that he hadn't attained full liberation. And then he went to the other teacher, and this teacher knew the formless realm absorptions, which Siddhartha quickly attained, even more refined states of meditation. And that teacher too offered him to co-lead the community. And again he turned it down because he knew that he hadn't yet attained full awakening. So you really look at him, and here's a person with incredible integrity, isn't it? Someone who could be so honest with himself and say, even though I've attained these delicious, blissful states of contemplation that they say, are so incredibly blissful, but he had the honesty to say, but I'm still not free from ignorance, anger, and attachment. Yeah, he had that honesty. And even though the teacher has acknowledged my realizations, and I cannot co-lead the community and be a big shot, no, that's not what I want. I'm not going to sell myself out for that. I'm going to continue on looking for real liberation. So at that point, what he did is he went with 5 friends who were doing ascetic practices, and he thought, okay, I'm going to do these super ascetic practices, because this was very popular in ancient India. And it's popular with various religious groups at different times. I mean, the Catholics used to be very into self-flagellation and sitting in ice-cold, freezing water and, doing these kinds of things to torment the body in order to overcome attachment to the body, or to overcome the bodily desires. So this is, done in many religions. Even nowadays in India, there are wandering ascetics who will do these kinds of things, and people who will stand on one leg for years, and especially if you go to Rishikesh, there's a lot of people like that. So this was quite popular at his time, and he thought, okay, if I really do severe ascetic practices, then I'll conquer this body. Because so often, our body is one of the sources of our biggest attachment, isn't it? The body's hungry, we need to feed it, it wants nice things to see, and nice things to hear, and nice things to smell, and nice things to touch, and the body is so demanding, and we can't stand for our body to be uncomfortable for the slightest moment. So, he thought somehow he would conquer the attachment to the body by doing these ascetic practices. So he went off with his 5 friends to a place near Gaya in ancient India. You can go there now. I think the whole region looks very different than it did at the time of the Buddha. It was apparently quite lush and green. And there was the flowing Nirajana River there. That river is now a dry bed, but you can cross the dry bed and go to this place where the Buddha did his ascetic practices for 6 years. So he did these ascetic practices, and there's some statues of the Buddha. There's one in the Delhi Museum and in some other museums of the Buddha looking so raggedy and completely just skin and bones. And they say that when he touched his belly button, he felt his spine, because he ate 1 grain of rice a day for 6 years. He lived off the food of samadhi, I guess, which you can do. So he did that, and then at a certain point he said, this also isn't leading me to full awakening. So in my home life and the family, I indulged in all the sense pleasures. Here, I'm denying myself of all the sense pleasures. Neither one of them works. Now, when your body's so weak that you can't meditate, or you're distracted by the sensations in the body, then it's not really serving a good purpose. So he decided to eat again and continue his meditation. And so his ascetic friends jeered at him and called him names and said he was copping out, and you said you were going to do this practice with us, and you're such a softy, you're going to go eat, and what are you doing? You're abandoning us, you're abandoning the path. But again, he knew that he had to be true to his heart, and he knew what he needed at that time. So he left his friends, and he sat under a tree, and this woman who was coming to make an offering to the tree spirit came with some rice porridge and thought he was the tree spirit and offered it to him. And he ate it, and he felt really rejuvenated by what he ate, and he realized, my mind can focus a lot better when I'm not putting undue stress on my body. So then he crossed the river. I think that's quite symbolic. He crossed the river and went into what is present-day Bodh Gaya. And then he sat under the Bodhi tree, and he said, I'm not going to get up until I'm fully awakened. I had a Dharma friend who did something similar. We all went to Nepal in the early years, and I was just going to stay. I had no idea to come back to the U.S. It was like this was the land of heathens. I was going to stay in Asia and get enlightened. And I had a friend who had the same idea, but he was going to go and retreat and get enlightened. I hadn't gotten that far yet. And so he went in retreat, and he was in retreat for a while. And then Lama Yeshe pulled him out and told him to start a business in Kathmandu. And then this is, kind of, it really tested him, and he did. He followed Lama's instructions. Because I really don't think that all of us were, so idealistic at that time. We thought, enlightenment's just around the corner. We had no idea of how complicated our mind is and how deep the afflictions were. Yeah, so often you need to do many other kinds of practices before you're able to go off and do this long retreat that we all dream of. Yeah, you have to really create the causes and conditions for that. Anyway, so he sat down with that kind of intention. But Siddhartha knew himself quite well, much better than I knew myself. And so he was actually able to succeed. But again, it wasn't without difficulty. Because first came the weapons. The weapons were first, right? And so Mara, the personification of our self-grasping ignorance, they make him sound like an external being, but it's really our own self-grasping ignorance, created all these hordes of warriors, so there he is, Siddhartha sitting and trying to focus his mind on the nature of reality, and there's Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda and the CIA and the FBI and the Taliban and, Assad's armies and Iran's armies and nuclear weapons, and they're all coming after him in his meditation. Yeah. And, think of what happens in our meditation. We have like one little kind of uncomfortable feeling, and it's like, get me out of here. But he had all of this coming at him at one time from all directions, And what it was his own anger, his own, all of that was manifestation of his own anger, his own resentment, his own suspicion of other people. Yeah, his own rebelliousness and malevolence. Now, it was all manifesting there. Now, not only his present qualities, but also the karmic ripenings of, so many actions done with ill will and spite and vengeance and grudges and, all of that ripening right there in your meditation in living Technicolor. Yeah? And he sat through it, and he didn't just sit through it and wait until it ended. Yeah, he didn't just sit there and wait until it went away. He looked at it with wisdom, and he said, these things are illusory appearances. They're illusory appearances. They're like seeing a face in the mirror. There's an appearance of a face, but there's not a real face. There's these appearances to my mind, but they're not real. And then he looked at them all with compassion, which was actually looking at himself with compassion. And as he looked at these things with wisdom and compassion, then they faded away. They disappeared. So that's telling us something about how to work in our own mind when our garbage comes up. When all of our anger comes up in our meditation, you're sitting there and you really want to be so peaceful, and your mind's just percolating with anger, And you remember things that happened years ago that you haven't thought about. And then there they are, and you're still angry about them. When I did the Vajrasattva retreat, the first summer after I met the Dharma, I was only 25 at the time, and in one meditation, I got so furious at my second grade teacher because she didn't let me be in the class play. How old are you in second grade? I think 7 years old. Yeah, I was still mad at my second grade teacher for that. There it is. And that's not talking about all the issues I had with my parents. the anger about that, and the anger at teachers, and the anger at friends, and the anger at boyfriends and ex-boyfriends. The boyfriends I weren't angry at. I got angry at them when they became ex-boyfriends. But there's not so much of a difference between the boyfriend and the ex-boyfriend. Yeah. So then this stuff comes up, and you have to work with it. You can't run away from it. No way to run away from it. Yeah, so you have to apply the Buddha's teachings and look at these things with wisdom and sort through all your confused emotions about the whole thing and come to some clarity about it. So he did that.
Didn't they turn into flowers?
Yes, they turned into flowers. Yeah. And they rained down on him when they turned into flowers. So not just letting them go, but actively transforming them. I've gone over time again. Shall I keep going? So then, the next in his meditation, anger's one thing to overcome. We all know anger's makes us miserable. So we have a lot of impetus to overcome our anger because it's so unpleasant being angry. But then he had, sense pleasure deluxe come to him. He continued his meditation, and then there was the Caribbean cruise, and Bali, and Hawaii, with all of, the beautiful people that he wanted to be with, and, all the sports. He could go snorkeling, he could go scuba diving, he could go swimming, he could play ping pong, and all of his friends, all the women around him loved to play ping pong, and they all let him win. And, the jewels and the trophies and the meeting important people and getting invited to important events and standing there with the whole crowd screaming at you, "We want you for president or senator," or whatever they are. So everything, every worldly pleasure, they usually describe it just in terms of all the women coming, but it means everything, all the worldly pleasure is there, again, in 3D Technicolor and his meditation. Yeah. Now, attachment's much more difficult because you feel kind of good when you have the objects you're attached to, don't you? And it's like, what's wrong with feeling good? The Buddha didn't say that we had to suffer. So this makes me feel good. What's wrong with it? Can't I have this happiness and practice the Dharma too? Because I have this happiness. I'm in such a good mood. It's so easy to sit down and practice when I'm in a good mood. What's wrong with this? This feels good. So what's wrong with it? Change? Change, but it'll change into pain, but then you can go do it again and you'll have happiness later on.
It'll change into exhausting.
No, that's only if it's not going to be really exhausting. Every time it fades away, you just go do it again.
All the pillows.
Yeah. What?
All the pillows and comfy beds are there too.
Yeah. Oh, yes, the pillows and comfy beds with no alarm clocks. So what's wrong with that?
Nothing.
Yeah. Nothing.
Also to be happy if they're not there.
Oh. You have to be happy when they're not there?
Also.
Oh. What happens if you're not happy when they're not there?
But then it's attachment.
But I'm not attached. I just have a little bit of suffering when they're not there. It's not anything major. Yeah. And it feels so good. And then everybody approves of me. You know, when I enjoy those pleasures, then actually it's much easier to practice, because then I don't feel guilty about, not living up to my worldly potential, and I don't have my parents breathing down my back telling me I should get married and have babies, and I have all these things, and it's enjoyable, and I can practice the Dharma and have all of them. And in fact, it's easier because, like I said, then I don't have these problems with everybody else thinking I'm crazy.
Where are you exactly practicing?
Well, I'm practicing the Dharma. I'm meditating on precious human life, and I'm making offerings to the Buddha, some bananas. It's, yeah. And I'm being kind to people. I'm smiling at them, and I'm definitely kind to all my boyfriends. And I cook these wonderful, luscious meals that I give to people, and I do some volunteer work in the homeless shelter too. Yeah. And my career's in the helping profession, so why not?
We heard this story last year at Shinrezi
Yeah,
retreat. I remember the story. And it brought tears to Tree Allen's eyes. Because she said, well, but how about the rest of us who are suffering? Is there some place in your mind for compassion for us? Please help us.
Yeah.
I remember that moment. I will never forget it.
Mm-hmm.
So self-concerning, so self-consumed, so totally into our own trips that we don't give a darn about anybody else. And that's what Tree heard when you were going on. I mean, we couldn't refute Venerable's story. Every time we tried to put her into the place of the suffering of change, the suffering of compounded suffering, she kept giving this storyline. And this woman in the back of the hall, I mean, she just had tears in her eyes, and she said, but Venerable, what about those of us who are suffering? Can you help us in the middle of all that you have? What about compassion? Do you have room for that for those of us who don't have this experience you're having?
You're describing their life.
You're just, yeah. And I'm crying, and she was just sobbing at the back of the room. I don't forget it. And to hear Venerable say that was like, it is the story of all of our lives, how we justify and we negotiate and we manipulate and we cajole ourselves into just intoxicating ourselves over and over again. And it's for the hell realms for sure. And we just don't care. We're just numbing.
We don't see.
We don't see it. We're totally lost.
We don't see.
Yeah. Yeah, we can't see it. And when Tree said that, the room was just silent. Yeah. And then there was Martha, who was also crying, because she said, you're just talking about my life.
So that's the problem.
That's the problem? Yeah.
We're not happy.
And we're completely self-absorbed, not caring about anybody else. Doing nice, sweet little things for other people that make them like us, but not really doing anything major that's going to lead them out of suffering. So that's what the Buddha faced in his meditation too. And when he saw that, and when he also saw that all these things, they too were just illusory appearances, then they all turned into old hags and bombed out cities and slums and disappeared. And then he continued to sit, And this is when he really had to face the ignorance. He faced the anger, he faced the clinging. Now it was facing the ignorance. And when he finally overcame that ignorance that doesn't see the nature of reality and that actively misconstrues the nature of reality, that actively projects a mode of existence onto things that they don't have, when he was able to overcome that and at the same time see that things still did exist, they just didn't exist in the way they appeared. At that time, at dawn, he attained full awakening. So I think we'll pause the story here. I usually do the story in one day. This year it's a little bit different. Yeah. But I'm hoping you're seeing some, parallels in your own life and some things to think about in your own life. And I must say the EML course is a very special course because the people who come to it are people who are exploring the option of becoming monastics. And so your minds are open to that. You're thinking about those kinds of things. In other courses, the people who come are not usually exploring that option. They want to practice Dharma, but they're not interested in monastic life. And so then they usually ask, well, do you have to become a monastic to practice the Dharma? And so I always say, no, you don't have to. You have to, you can be a good lay practitioner, and so on and so forth. And I don't get too heavy into all the defects, these kinds of defects, because it's really too shocking for people to look at sometimes. Or put it this way, I teach them in a much more general way. There's the 6 kinds of dukkha, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But I don't give it with these kinds of examples and so forth, because those people aren't ready to hear it. But I'm assuming that the people who come to this kind of course are ready to hear it. That's why you came. Yeah. So I'm giving it to you. And if it's pushing your buttons, that's good. That's what's supposed to happen. Yeah. If nothing pushes your buttons, then somehow I haven't done my job very well. But, our buttons need to be pushed. Okay, so let's dedicate.